What I was trying to tell you is just to give a brief introduction about the Indian economy. It's close to 3 trillion. The last count says that we are 2.87 trillion US dollar economy. But the IMF, going by the IMF projection, the economy is going to contract by 10%, which is basically saying that maybe COVID has had some toll on the economic activity so far as India is concerned. And most of the other countries in the world are also facing the same economic, if I may use the word recession, but because technically by definition, recession means if your GDP is contracting by simultaneously for the 2 quarters, then you are in a recession. And the data shows that across the world, the economy is in recession. And another thing which has been talked about, if you kind of listen or read the newspaper or listen to some news editorial or news portal or TV discussion, you will find that income inequality is another thing which is growing quite a bit. So if I look into the distribution function of income, we find that it is increasingly becoming positively skewed, which means that rich are getting richer, whereas the poor are becoming poorer. So therefore, there is needs of some government intervention. There is also need to understand what is the role that the powerful and the rich and the elite in the society they play so far as trying to ensure that the income distribution does not become too much of a positively skewed type distribution, because a very much unequal income distribution can cause some type of problem for our society. For instance, if you look into the marginal propensity to consume, meaning that how much any person consume out of the income they are earning, you will always find for the poor people, the marginal propensity to consume is much higher compared to what we see in the context of rich. Because between rich and the poor, you will have to spend on your food, you will have to spend on your education, you will have to spend on your basic necessity, And because the income of the poor is small, they have to spend a larger chunk of their income on all this basic necessity. And because of this, what we find, the marginal propensity to consume for the poor is much higher. And when there is too much of income inequality, then what happens also is the rich and the powerful, they tend to spend more income, more portion of their income on foreign-made goods and services. And that, from the macroeconomic sense, may get boomerang in the sense that you might end up seeing a scenario where when this rich and powerful are buying the foreign goods, for instance, buying Mercedes-Benz or for instance, buying some Volkswagen car. So when you're buying some foreign-made goods and services, not only your current account deficit goes up, but the propensity of you creating some employment opportunity in India also goes down. And something which is being talked about again in the recent times is in India, because of COVID, there has been a loss in both life and livelihood. And therefore, it is important for us to understand in what way the elite are performing, in what way the elite are contributing to any particular society. And thankfully, we have with us Professor Guido Cozzi, who has created something what is called Elite Index. And I'm sure that I have shared that editorial that we have written for Economic Times yesterday. I don't know whether you have had chance to go through that article. But if you read through that article, you will find that in order to ensure that the business is growing at a sustainable pace, it is very much necessary for the elite to contribute in a meaningful way to the society, And therefore, I thought that it would be a very nice idea to understand from the author himself, which is Professor Cozzi, to come and talk to us and tell us in what way what he is trying to do is unique, and in terms of contribution to the society, why this particular index is important. So, Cozzi, if you would like to start, we are on. We'd be much delighted, to listen to your thought process.
Thank you so much, Nilanjan. This is an excellent presentation. I am showing you some slides so that you can better understand what Professor Banik was saying, because elites are important, and probably at the end of your course you will become part of the elite, probably, or at least you are trying to target that. And elites means people who are able to affect society. So they can affect society by creating value to society, like Professor Banik was saying, by increasing, for example, GDP. But also they could create that value for themselves, or maybe extract the value for themselves, which relates to what Professor Banik was saying about inequality. Because when someone has some degree of power, which could be market power, could be political power, or could be anything related that could affect society, institutions, regulation, then clearly we must assume that these people are they are generous towards the rest of society, but on one side there is also a tendency to be selfish. So it is possible that they may tend to increase their portion of the pie rather than increasing the whole pie. So this is the big difference. Sometimes the two things may go against each other, and Professor Banik was mentioning the distribution and consumption. So John Maynard Keynes has shown that, and this was proved by other economists, that the marginal propensity to consume of the poor is much higher than the marginal propensity of consume to the rich, which in times of recession may help a lot the economy recover. So even improving the distribution in favor of the poor will boost private consumption and may help the country out of the recession. Even though, of course, it's not so easy to achieve quickly. There could be some transfers in favor of the poor or other interventions, but if it is achieved too late, it may have a bad effect. So even elites are in charge of designing this policy well. So can you all see my slides? I try to share them.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see it. Yeah.
Fantastic. So if you have questions, by the way, feel free to interrupt. So I will be talking about the elite quality index, because we decided that elites are very important in society, but yet people either complain about elites or try to get into the elites and praise them or flatter them. But nobody so far tried to really measure how value creators they are versus rent seekers. Okay, so we will. I will try to discuss. These slides are probably a bit long, so I try to be to focus on, to narrow down then to the most important aspects. But we will be talking a little bit about the theory of elite, and then give some examples, and then starting measuring elite quality and interpreting for some countries. Elites, as I mentioned before, could be not only politicians, but also captains of industry. They shape the country they are in, and usually they produce a lot of value. So successful entrepreneurs are probably the most dynamic part of the elite, and they produce huge value not only for their own family or their own firm, but they produce value to the country, because a successful firm will be successful because it's producing better or something more interesting. and people are free to buy or not. So elites have shaped development, even though sometimes they become important, perhaps too much, and may affect policy. Okay, so the elites are there in order to function. The economy needs some guidance. From the very micro level to the macro level, so from the single small firm to the big government policies, and elites are groups which are well prepared and who can talk to each other, can give each other advice and coordinate their action. Okay, so this allows them to be, when they are what we say high quality, this allows them to create a lot of value, not only for their firms, but the value for their firms will get along with the value of the market in which they operate, or the industry, or the whole country, or the region, or the state in case of India, many states, or the whole country, which in Indian case is a subcontinent, so it is really big. In other countries where I'm located now is Switzerland is very small, 8 million people or so. So it is rich, but can be hardly compared to small Indian states. But elites, by coordinating with each other, can create value, but sometimes they coordinate on each other in order to extract value. And this is known since the time of Adam Smith and David Ricardo. Okay, so we are trying to measure that, and some people say we can get rid of elites. This is impossible. People cannot directly control all the firms, all the activities of a country on an equal basis. At least some who even in those who were talking about socialism, those who are gifted and better able to guide a firm or an industry or a country, they should do it. So it is very often things don't go right; they go badly wrong. People tend to accuse lots of aspects, including technology, or maybe competition from China, aging, moral breakdown, and so on and so forth. But maybe sometimes the causes of their discontent, the real causes of their discontent, lie elsewhere. We can see problems arising in many indexes, but maybe sometimes when things go wrongly, the country is just because it's unlucky, like with COVID, or could be that elites are not playing extremely well, or they are using the relatively low cost of organizing their collective action for not exactly for the value of the country. Okay, so there is a lot of economic theory. You can see very important economists here. As I was mentioning, starting from Adam Smith and David Ricardo, but then we can go to Joseph Schumpeter and the concept of creative destruction. Okay, that this is inspired by the industrial world. In the industrial world, when a firm invents something new and important and very useful, people will start buying this instead of buying old, some related old products, and this will imply that old firms or rich entrenched entrepreneurs supplying this not so new goods and services will be replaced by the newcomers. Okay, by the new entrants, and this is one of the great things of capitalism that allows this dynamic competition. Okay, so but it's like you guys, you are young and you want to enter several markets where you will be operating, for example, as entrepreneurs, and you will find established entrepreneurs who may help you, or may fund you, finance you, or maybe may fear you. So entry sometimes is feared by established incumbents, and Joseph Schumpeter, this Austrian economist of the first half of the 20th century was intrigued by the fact that innovation are usually done by the young. Then they get old and powerful, and then there are new young entrepreneurs or firms challenging them. And this dynamic process is called creative destruction, because the existing monopolies, if you want, the existing profit, the firms who are, the existing profitable firms are being replaced in a way that creates value to society. So this is a very special theory, but super interesting. And then, but if this is true, then it is possible that the established entrepreneurs in some industry try to block entry, on new entrepreneurs. So they use their coordination power to block that, and maybe so these dominant coalitions sometimes stifle growth. You see some countries not growing too much. You see in some countries the middle income trap. Darona Semoglu predicts that China will have a middle income trap because now it's been growing very fast, but it doesn't have the level of democracy and innovative capacity that will allow China's growth to last. So it's claiming that China will be blocked also by these coalitions of state-owned enterprise managers and politicians. So whatever the reason may be, is right or wrong, but dominant coalitions sometimes they become a hindrance to growth, and they tend also to affect regulation. You will see in our index, if you download the elite quality report, you will see that our index also has a part which is regulatory capture. So it is when elites, this dominant established incumbent firms or groups try to write, to convince politicians to write a regulation in their favor in order not to allow new entrants to challenge them. Okay, so the whole thing.
Yeah, but I just can't resist but to ask you one important thing, because the student might not know that about this middle income trap. So students, just so you understand, that middle income trap is even being talked about for some of our states in India. For instance, Gujarat or Maharashtra, which have been growing at a faster pace compared to the rest of India. You will find that over the last few years, their growth tend to converge to I don't know whether we can call it steady state. So the middle income trap is beyond, if you were to that the World Bank has its own definition of classifying country into the low income, then lower middle income, upper middle income, and high income countries. You can check the World Bank website. My question to you, Professor Cozzi, is how much this technological breakthrough is important for any state, or for that matter any country, because you can actually have growth either through labor force participation or through technological innovation or through a combination of both of them,
Absolutely true.
So when you are talking about this middle income trap, as in the context of China, are you suggesting that there is a necessity for the technology to take over as opposed to just trying to grow through labor force participation? Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. You're totally right. China at the moment, has become higher middle income. So it was extremely successful. The big question is whether it will become a high income country or not. And the answer is exactly what you are saying. Because what happens since Robert Solow has a growth theory from which he won the Nobel Prize, and according to this theory, when a country doesn't have enough physical capital installed, then we could extend it to human capital and to other means of production. The country can achieve fast growth by increasing the amount of these means of production per capita, or increasing the basic human capital per capita. So this will allow fast growth. But once it becomes, let's say, similar to an advanced country, a higher income country in terms of capital per capita. What makes the difference is what makes the difference also for Switzerland, for the United States, for Germany, Japan. So what makes the difference is technology, exactly as you were saying. Developing technology is very crucial. In that sense, I think regarding India, I think India has a lot of advantages to China. On the technological side, it can count on very advanced human capital. True, also China has them. And also regarding states, you mentioned Gujarat. I think Gujarat is a very dynamic state, and I wouldn't be surprised that its growth rate reduces compared to poorer states, exactly for the same catch-up effect of the solo model. So if there is a state in which the additional benefit from investing and putting more capital is higher than a more advanced state, then it's likely that unless there are some other elements that block growth, that growth should grow faster in the poorer states. If we don't see growth faster in the poorer states, then this is a warning. I mean, there is a problem that must be solved. Okay, but as soon as it's like it's like in physics. If there is a slope where I would predict a ball to fall down until it becomes flat, if I don't see the ball falling down, then there must be something blocking it. Okay, so those blocks must be identified and removed so that the country can. So I wouldn't be surprised to see. I mean, it would be the sign of actually an excellent management of the economy when I see poorer states growing faster than richer states.
Students, do you have any question up to this point so that we can clarify some of your doubts if you have?
Sir,
Yes?
so I have a question. Sir,
Please switch on your
competition.
video. Yeah, please. Yeah, Ishan.
Yes, my video is on. Okay, sir. So my question is that competition is one of the major factors in this theory, I see. But is monopoly in a market which makes competition not so fair if a company monopolizes the market, then is it seen as seen as something which is not supposed to be there, or it is seen as natural, which should not be dealt with?
No, that's a super important question. Thank you so much. This is a great question. What's your name, by the way?
Ishan.
It's Ishan Raj.
Ishan, okay. So Ishan, thank you for this excellent question, because and this is extremely on the point, because I was talking about Schumpeter and creative destruction. According to his theory, but I would say in general, because I'm also a Schumpeterian economist, I'm writing innovation and growth models. I'm kind of advancing his theory. We should distinguish between monopolies. Okay, in the perfect Schumpeterian world, innovators, so the young and rampant entrepreneurs who enter with a new product, okay, and conquer a big market, they should be rewarded for their effort, especially if this effort means a lot of money in research and development and investment, and sunk money that is there, has been spent before profit started. So in this case, monopolistic profits would be a good thing, because they would reward the innovative effort. Okay, of course, basic microeconomics is telling us that when there is a monopoly, it will produce less than in a perfectly competitive industry, unless there is price differentiation, but usually it's not the case. There is a degree of inefficient in a static sense. So statically speaking, monopolies have inefficiencies, but dynamically speaking, if these monopolies are the result of of innovative work, that it's sufficient to keep that, because if we only allow perfect competition and we bash monopolies, as soon as we see some profits, nobody will innovate anymore, unless one imitates innovations of others, but how long can it go? So Joseph Schumpeter said that there is a trade-off between static and dynamic efficiency. So on the other side, there could be other monopolies. So you used the adjective natural. Okay, so in microeconomics, a natural monopoly could be a bit tricky, because could be a situation in which there are such strong increasing returns to scale in some industries, so that you only one or few firms really survive because there is massive investment needed. This is okay in one sense, but it should be regulated better, because these profits are not arising from innovation, but from a natural distortion of the market. On the other side, sometimes in this industry, especially when they're related to natural resources, for example, they depend on regulation. Okay, so it is possible that a country that is oil exporting massively, or other materials, like is the case of Russia, for example, many of these monopolies owe their profits to some favors that the regulator willingly or by chance makes them. Okay, in this sense, this would be extraction. So there are positive and negative, and also creative extraction. Of course, I mean, is more. We do not necessarily have to see a turnover. Sometimes the threat of a turnover by new entrants, the challenge of the new entrants allows also the incumbents to improve. So sometimes you see monopolies or big firms that have been expanding all over the way since the past, but yet remaining on top of their sector and innovating and expanding to new technologies. Okay, so this is also another monopoly, the source of monopoly that is dynamic, and I would consider it acceptable from a Schumpeterian point of view, as long as the field is open to entrants. As long as there is the potential threat of new entrants, then so this is also acceptable. But this is one of the most difficult and most important questions in not only microeconomics, but also in growth and macroeconomics.
Yeah, another interjection in the sense that, are you therefore suggesting that technology can also do away with the extractive power of the natural monopolies? Because what we are seeing now, thanks to the technology, you have some oil companies in the US, they are able to manufacture or extract oil at a much cheaper price, because of which you see in Saudi Arabia or in other places, this natural monopoly kind of thing, their extractive power on nature is going down. So technology can also help to take away the extractive power that you are talking about of the natural monopoly, of any natural monopoly. Is that
absolutely true also? But I mean, also in the oil industry there has been a lot of innovation, and also those who use fossil energy have innovated themselves. So if we see how much fossil energy is used per unit of GDP, now it is much lower than in the past. So true, GDP has increased. So there is a lot of innovation there. There are pollution abatement technologies. But there are, yeah, still there are new entrants like shale cracking. So there is a lot of innovation going on there as well. There, the problem maybe is not the absence, depending on the sector, especially in the US. Because one thing is Russia, maybe one thing is the US. So especially in the US, I think maybe the potential problem is not the absence of innovation in the oil industry, which is actually is going pretty well, but the externalities of the oil industry on the environment So this is a problem that goes beyond monopolies. It could be a perfectly competitive industry, yet has external effects on other parts of the economy and of society that should be controlled. So the environment, especially for the young, if we keep destroying the environment right now, we are ruining the life of the young in the future, of our grandchildren. So we also consider environmental protection in our index, because if an elite, we see in a country that an elite is trying to do something to help the environment, it means this elite is forward-looking, is caring about the future generation. So it's not using their power only for their myopic interests. If we see in a country that the environment is not protected, it means the elites, they say, okay, we know this is our life. Maybe we are old or we are middle-aged. We use this power to enjoy a great life now. Who cares about the future? Okay, so that would be a more rent extracting.
Okay, so yeah, so is it all that you have to say, or do you want to give some more?
Regarding the elite, maybe I could mention something important. Okay, so so the richest countries, according to this view, would be countries with great institutions, and this flowchart is probably the most important. So elite quality, the elite business model, their value creation inclination affects institutional quality, and institutional quality affects development, because it sets the rules of the game. So it is very important to consider that. So I think that then we can make several examples. I don't have time. I don't want to abuse of my time. There were moments in the history, for example, of important countries like the UK at the time of the second industrial revolution, where the elites were really closing the country too much. And the famous corn laws would keep corn price high to the detriment of the poor classes, but also the expansion of the economy. And then, fortunately, they were abolished, and part of the elite, the industrial elite, which was opposed to these landowners, managed to change the country and to transform the country into a superstar, which wouldn't have happened, by increasing democracy and involving more people, extending the right to vote, the franchise. So in a way, this was a very courageous act by part of the elite, the more progressive part of the elite, because in the past we can say power and value. Okay, so the elite had high power, and they were thinking of value extraction rather than value creation. After the franchise was extended and the corn laws were abolished, and child labor was banned, education was started. All happened in the second half of the 19th century in the UK. The elites lost some power, but because they involved the rest of the population, but at the same time they were kind of forced to become more value oriented, and they created the success of the most important, probably historically one of the most important countries. So the whole point is whether to grow the slice of the pie or grow the pie. So based with this stuff, we have the report, and we rank our countries, and we decompose the ranking into some components related to economic power, political power, economic value, and political value. Which includes, for example, creative destruction, which is a good thing. So it will increase the number, the index. Firm dominance is not. If a firm is too dominant, or if an industry is too concentrated, then this is not good. So also we have mobility and other stuff. Probably maybe I don't have time, but these are our the variables we consider in the index, and we have ranking. Okay, so at the moment it's still a pilot project with 32 countries, but next year it will be extended to nearly the whole world, and so it will be improved. So we can see a classification for the countries we could take a look. I don't know. I probably have no time. I would talk about Italy, of course. India, you have a scorecard, and if you are interested, you can take a look at the article that came out yesterday on the Economic Times, written by me and Professor Banik, and then we can talk about our other countries as well. But probably, if there is time, I would be glad to do it, of course.
So. Before I let the student ask you a few questions, first of all, thank you for giving such a nice presentation. But I have a few questions, and of course, it will help our student to understand this concept better. Now, you gave that example of corn law in the UK, and you said that in some sense the elite over in Britain, they were visionary, I would say, because they could understand that if they were to open up the economy, that means more per capita income for the economy as a whole. So if you gain, I also gain, so it's a win-win situation. But at the same time, you also spoke about this whole concept of public good, like the impact on the climate. For instance, if I am digging some oil or without disregard to the climate in general, and why I'm stating the climate, because in India, if you look, one of the reasons why our HDI ranking, Human Development Index ranking, is low for India has to do that we don't care that much about the climate. So my question is, it also depends what level of well-being you are in, because if I'm a poor country, my priority is what we call food, housing, and maybe health, not so much about what my future generation is going to get in terms of the climatic condition. Because the priority is my present discounted value of consumption is more because I first want to live, and therefore the disregard for the climate, or for that matter, any other countries, will be different from the perspective of policy-making bodies, depending upon which country we are talking about, So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, because we were ranking the countries, have you control for this aspect in some way or other? Because in terms of, and I'll try to tell you why I'm getting into this, because we also try to look into the Human Development Index. Initially, they were actually bringing out Human Development Index without considering the distribution of income. Then we said, hey, it's not the correct way of looking at Human Development Index, because distribution of income also plays an important role depending upon how developed a society is, For instance, if I go to some of this natural monopoly oriented country like Middle East, Human Development Index is quite low in spite of the fact that their per capita income is high, and that has to do with the distribution of income. So what I'm trying to understand, and I'm sure that some of the students may also have some questions, is if the US is saying that, okay, we will give some amount of money because it's a public good. So therefore, the cost that you are talking about, am I taking into consideration this externalities that you just now spoke about? And if yes, have you control for that in your ranking?
No, that's a great question. That's a great question. In fact, it's true now we have few countries, so we cannot group them by development stage. But as soon as we have the index for 2021, which will be at least 100 countries, we will start doing these comparisons because it's very important. You can have a country, you cannot really compare countries at different stages of development, and it's right. And sometimes elites have had to make choices. So there is a trade-off. It's true we cannot. I mean, we should compare. It's true that that at the moment India is extremely penalized. I don't know if you can still see the slides with the. I try to highlight India's scorecard, and the environmental protection index is the worst of all, and it's ranking 32 of 32nd of 32 countries. So this is a big drag at the moment. So India is being penalized for that. We should compare it to countries with similar GDP per capita to see whether this is something okay, fact of life that is hardly evident, or if there is too much neglect. I think, I mean, being at the last position, I would say that maybe because since India is also very good on other aspects, for example, inflation control, currency control, it's like it's like the United States almost. So it is, and in other aspects as well. I would say it's important I mean, our index is not saying the country is not good and this or that. We are like, it's like the blood test, So we're saying you should put more effort into rebalancing that. So elites should be aware that something is not going on very well there in some sectors, in this case the environment, and they should put more attention. So even an increase in the ranking from 32 to 31 would be a big change. So this will be appreciated. In fact, from the next year, we will start comparing year to year. So if we see improvements, this will be great. So yeah, but you're right. It is a very hard job for an elite in a developing country. On other aspects, India has been growing more than China. It has a great. It is performing extremely great. So it would be nice to expect something similar going on in the environmental dimension.
One thing we score above China is because China has already built their infrastructure. So the marginal value addition from building one more additional bridge or school or hospital is always going to be less in China in comparison to India, for the simple matter we don't have, So the in terms of marginal benefit, it is always beneficial, at least for the India, and therefore to grow faster, there is a potential. But what worries me is, and that is a related question which I have for you, is are you giving the equal weight to the variety of indicators that you are taking, or are you giving a differential weight?
We have it's basically almost equal weight. So, and our ranking doesn't change if we put equal weight. We try to based on advice we had from talking to experts, we try to maybe correct and trim them a little bit, but we don't want to move too far away from the equal weighting index. Regarding China, it's true. What you're saying is certainly true. But in China, there is also a divide between different provinces. Right. So if I consider Shenzhen, of course, there or other, or even in the Shanghai municipality and so on, the marginal product of capital is much lower. But if we go west, if we go inland, because the coastal parts is the most advanced, but if we go more inland, we find a more heterogeneous situation. So I think the big challenge for China at the moment is try to build infrastructure also outside of the usual coastal provinces or cities. Yeah. There is a lot to gain. In this case, it's similar to India, because India also, and it's not the coastal versus inland, but there is a lot of heterogeneity. So sometimes the reallocation of resources from the more mature parts to the least mature parts, assuming it will increase the marginal product capital overall. It is true that It is true that depends. First one must fix the bottlenecks and the additional problems. Maybe say if in Italy, for example, we spent a huge amount of money in the south of Italy, yet it is still far less developed than the north. There are different theories, people with different ideologies, political vision, and so on will tell you different stories. From the fact that in the southern they are not good, they are mafia guys and so on, to the fact that the north has been exploited in the south since the Italian unification. So there are different theories, but it's true that it's extremely hard to make public investment work in the south of Italy. I was meeting a group of experts last week exactly discussing about that, because the government had to decide whether to increase investment or to do other stuff, increase employment. In a sense, in the end, they decided to increase employment by reducing the fiscal wedge on labor. But some people say, no, they should increase investment. But other people brought up data and said, look at the data, we've been investing massively there and it's not going. Maybe the institutional quality in the southern regions of Italy has to be fixed first. So there are aspects. But from a purely economic point of view, if we improve, maybe we have to improve the elites in these regions, or maybe in some states in India or some provinces in China. Even though the provinces in China, I think that in China the problem is more Beijing than the provinces. But because provincial leaders are totally controlled by the center, opposite to India, so and to Italy. So. Yeah, if we manage to improve the institutions so that they kind of are in an equal basis, then we should see fast growth in the poor parts of these big countries.
No, so you're absolutely correct, because as you know that the Hall and Jones model basically spoke about this institution, and the moment you say about the mafia, it has to be inversely correlated with how powerful is the institution or how efficient is the institution. In India, for instance, if I look into the court system, you have the high courts which are not efficient, because I'm measuring efficiency in terms of the number of court cases that are yet to be resolved. On the other hand, the same Supreme Court, which is part of the same judiciary system, is quite efficient. So yes, so if we want to fix any region, it makes sense. And the China thing that you were saying, and myself and Anurag has worked on this India data also. And what we found is the difference between India and China is, like you correctly mentioned, that in case of China, there has been a regional variance in the growth. The coastal areas seems to have grown much faster compared to the hinterland. So basically, in case of China, the concept of absolute convergence is not going to work. On the other hand, for India, you see that Bihar or Orissa or some of the eastern states, which were not growing faster, are now growing much faster rate, even faster than Gujarat and Maharashtra. And therefore, we see a possibility of absolute convergence. Whereas in case of China, it has to be conditional about, on the various factors that you are talking about. So likewise, because within country there is so much of disparity, is this also getting reflected in this elite index that you are, or have you tried to control for that, this within country disparity?
Well, we somewhat yes, but we are still working on that. That should be, because we have inequality. But the geographical disparity, I think, is not well captured. We have an index of political and economic decentralization that somewhat indirectly captures this. But no, I think we have to include those variables there, even though our focus is on the elites. So what you're basically saying there is when there is a lot of disparity, the elite of the central, so your vision is that maybe the elite of the central government is extractive vis-a-vis that of the local governments or something, or maybe the elite of the central government is trying to increase the value, but the elites of the local play, because you mentioned also the local courts, maybe the elites in the local governments is the problem.
Yeah, because,
we need to. It's difficult to find to really find the correct theory, but that's important and the correct indicator for this theory, because we try for every variable we put, we try to discuss whether what this implies, what we can infer on the elites. Because, by the way, we are not measuring the elite quality directly, okay? We are not measuring the QI or the elites, or, you know, their criminal record or stuff like that. We are, there is an index of corruption, but this is more general. But we try to see the effects, so to infer the elite quality from the effects. I think it would be nice also together to think a bit about what kind of regional inequality, provincial inequality, district inequality index would better represent, would represent elite quality in what sense?
In the sense, let's say that if I'm looking into the state of Gujarat, you know, most of the industrialists in India, be it the Ambanis, Adanis of the world, they are based out of one state, you know, and therefore some of the central government policies, and you also know the type of industry that elites are controlling. So maybe some of the central policy which the government is taking is favoring this type of regional elitism, or because if I go to the eastern part of India, maybe that part of India is better for certain industry where you don't have that much power of the elite, you know, and therefore the central policy may be going against that, you know. So I'm trying to think aloud, because if we are trying to do something in the context of India, or for that matter within any country, there is so much of regional disparity, variation, you know, and how you control for that. So that is.
Yeah, maybe there is this sentence. There was. I read a recent interview by Rajan, who was saying that from the founding fathers of India after independence, there was sort of neglect of the the village part of the country. It was a centralized vision. I don't know if this is still there, but he claims that this could be a problem. So that will go in the direction somewhat of what you're saying. On the other side, it's true. If then there isn't much, then we should think more about it. And anyway, it's true. I mean, if there is inequality in the economic performance of different parts of a country, it is not a good sign. So we can say maybe the culprit is the center, the culprit is the periphery, whatever, but there is something elites should try to do. Ideally, we should develop an index of Indian states, and would be great if we could do it together, because you already created an index of Indian states, but with an eye on the local elites. That could maybe, it's not easy though, even conceptually, but that would allow a better understanding in the sense, again, it's not a criminal investigation. We don't want to bash any elite. We want to help them improve, and we are sure that there is part of the elite who really want to improve, like it was in England in the past. So but we can highlight where and how, also for the central government, also for Delhi, highlight, understanding exactly what is not going on. Some places may help them, fix, do a little bit of adjustment and help those local parts to grow.
Okay. So let me open up the floor for the students. Students, please feel free to ask any question, doubt that you may have on this, on the Indian economy in general, world economy in general, because next you are going to present. So if you have any doubt, question, please feel free to ask.
Sir?
Yes,
Sorry, it's me again.
Yeah. Right.
So I was thinking that in the current situation which Indian economy is in, means it is comparatively worse than any other country right now, because it's going in minus. So in this situation, the liberalization of the economy is a bad idea, or is it not?
You always ask very difficult questions. Well, there are pros and cons, right? It depends on the analysis. True, but I would first like to say that what we see now is not the normal. Okay, so we are in a COVID crisis. We're in the middle of that also in Europe, and it's not necessarily, this COVID crisis is an exogenous shock to which the countries are reacting. And most of the times it's not this disease itself that is causing the trouble, because at the end of the day, a small percentage of the population is getting seriously ill, but it is the restrictions needed to help people not to get sick and to help the old part of the population in particular. So it is possible that, and these restrictions imply that people cannot go to work. So it becomes a supply side shock, even though it's not, it's much more complex than that, becomes an inevitable reduction in supply. Okay, due to the simple fact that in some sectors it's impossible to do smart working from home, unlike in our sector. So we are lucky in this sense. And for many people, this means not being able to work. For firms, many firms means not being able to produce. So we see GDP dropping. Okay, then there are also demand consequences, because uncertainty and the loss of income may reduce demand and consumption further, because people are scared. Even rich people are worried because they are earning much less. So together with the supply shock, there is a demand shock operating, and this also explains why the inflation rate is a bit of the big mystery, because in Europe we are in deflation. In India, for example, now inflation is picking up, especially in the food sector. And this is a classical case. When people cannot produce food, then inflation starts there. But in whatever, this crisis is self-inflicted by the need to save the life of people. So it is possible that a country that is doing more restrictions because they care more about the health of their people will inflict more damage to GDP. Whereas maybe a country where maybe there is a president who cares less about this virus spreading, there will be a faster recovery because they are opening up. So to be honest, I wouldn't judge a country by the GDP performance right now. And indeed, in our index now about India, we tried to introduce, even though it is an index of 2019, still it overlaps to the first half of 2020. So we tried to put an index we found around with conglomerating different aspects about the COVID response to the country, and India, despite its serious problems in the health sector, its lack of investment and infrastructure, still reacted extremely well to COVID-19. So it is far above. If you see the ranking position of the our COVID index is much higher than the global health index, which also depends on the past. It's not just so. I think could be that since India responded so massively trying to fix this problem amid a very difficult initial condition, now we see a GDP thermometer penalizing it, but that's not necessarily a good sign. Hopefully it will go back to normal soon. Liberalization are more a long-term thing. So liberalization in some sectors is badly needed, not only in India, also in China, for example. There are some sectors where we can say that part of China's growth, according to there is a very important paper by Song, Stoneslett and Zilibotti, American Economic Review 2011, where they growing like China is the model, okay? And they proved that a large part of China's spectacular growth was not even the increasing returns to scale logic of the classical and neoclassical theory, but the mere reallocation of resources from low productivity state-owned enterprises to much more productive privately owned enterprises. So the state-owned enterprises in China are favored, also because the same elite that is governing the country is also or leading state-owned enterprises, and also the finance to state-owned enterprises is favored because the big China's banks are all public, so it's a transfer from the public sector to the public sector, whereas the private sector is being penalized. So for China, when China started to let at least the small state-owned enterprises go and maybe keep the most important, the most strategic, which are also efficient, because it's some China state-owned enterprises are amazing. Still, this mere reallocation has boosted China's growth. So growth, because this is puzzle, because China's growth didn't look like diminishing over time. It was actually accelerating. And then diminishing. So there was this linear part, and economists have been puzzling: are there increasing returns to scale operating? Is the neoclassical growth model wrong? What this study confirms is that actually the neoclassical growth model would have operated if the economy hadn't underwent a reallocation, but the reallocation from public to private spurred the growth temporarily, massively. Of course, when reallocation starts, let's say, slowing down, or more exactly exploiting the profitable reallocation opportunities more, then the decreasing returns to scale will start operating again. So some people were thinking China's figures were fake, that GDP could not. Maybe this is also there. But still, the reallocation from public to private sometimes is very good. Other times, not necessarily. It depends. If I see a very efficient public firm being privatized, then I say, okay, maybe there is a problem. But if I see inefficient public firms being replaced by private ones, then in the medium run is good. Of course, during an emergency, maybe I would think more of the short run than the medium run. I wouldn't care too much about productivity in the short run.
In fact, if I may extend what you are saying in the context of India, so you are rightly in pointing out this COVID is an exogenous shock. Even the earlier case, like 2008, or for that matter, recession earlier, which happened, those were endogenous in the sense that it was building up, and then from the financial sector, you got a spillover into other sector. But this particular case is a black swan event. It is a totally exogenous shock. But one thing I just want to mention to our student is these days tariff does not matter, because if you look into whichever sector, at least in the context of India, some of the things we were importing before COVID happened, we actually started exporting the same items. For instance, if I'm talking about ventilators, if I'm talking about this protective gears, these are the items which India were actually importing at some point of time. But after COVID, after the government asked some of the industry houses, for instance, Mahindra and Tatas of the world, to manufacture these ventilators and the protective gear units, India for the first time realized they can also start exporting, and they were actually exporting. And if you look into the tariff, thanks to WTO, which now is more or less defunct, but tariff has not increased over a period of time. In fact, if you look into the effective, now what matter is, because we are all part of the supply chain, global supply chain, and therefore what matter more is the effective rate of protection. Now, if you look into the effective rate of protection for India, it has actually fallen, because effective rate of protection in a very simple term means that you are importing some inputs, you are using that input for your final activities, and then you are re-exporting that final product, what China has been doing. So for India, effective rate of protection has been falling. So in terms of tariff, no one talks about tariff. But what is happening now, which is more important, is protectionism has come in the form of non-tariff measures. And there are various types of non-tariff measures, because those are not being kind of looked into from the WTO angle, and this is not mandatory, So that is just a small piece of information that I'd like to add to what Cozzi has said just now. Any other question? Yeah. Any question, guys?
And so, again, I would like to add up to a question
Yeah.
that China has shown an impressive growth rate, as you said, but why is its worker means why does its worker is still a low paid worker means low wages? The reason why America loves China because it has the lowest wages which you have to provide to your workers, because of which the investment of international companies are very high in China. So growth rate has increased, but the wage is still the same. Means they are still the lowest. They are still getting the lowest wages they ever got.
You mean wages? You mean the wages of the workers in China?
Yes.
Well,
Yes,
actually, it's been growing. It is growing.
It's growing.
It has been growing in the past 2 decades at least. And in fact, the firms are thinking of diversifying elsewhere, and they move to other parts of Asia. It's true. Also, it's true that China is scaling up the value chain, but I wouldn't say that wages are obviously lower than the United States, but they haven't been declining there. Actually, they have been declining in the United States, not in China.
In fact, China has now started moving their factories to Vietnam, Cambodia of the world. If you go and visit all this Southeast Asia, particularly the greater Mekong sub-region, you'll find that lots of Chinese factory which are in the business of assembling. They have shifted their base to all these countries because of higher input cost in China. Now, China has, of course, they have like what Cozzi was saying, which is very important. They have actually shifted their production from low productive sector to the high productive sector. Now China is taking, and that is now this whole IPR thing, which is kind of happening between China and US, because US, for instance, is thinking that China is going to sooner or later, thanks to all this big Chinese firm like Alibaba, Tencent of the world, they are going to take over the Apple or Google of the world. So that is something now they have realized that if somehow they don't tighten the screw on this IPR sooner, because now, as you know, that in terms of purchasing power parity, China, if I'm not mistaken, has overtaken US. It is the largest economy in the world. Yeah. So if one has to ask me where should I put my money, my bet will be on China, no matter how much we are fighting with China right now. But if you want to become rich within the next 10 years, whatever investment you want to make, put your money in the Chinese market. So that's my small piece of suggestion. Okay, so any other question from any other students? Only Ishan has been asking a question. Let me, Ishan, let me see whether anyone else would like to ask any question. Yeah, Guna, can you switch on your video? And I said sir, all of you have to switch on your video. I don't know why you are not switching off your on your video.
So the camera is on. I did not switch it off.
Okay, it's on. Okay, now we are able to see you. Yeah, please.
So which economy is better for the benefit of its citizens, like a socialist market economy like China or mixed economy like India, for the welfare of the citizens? Which economy is better?
Well, that's another super difficult question. I wish I knew. I must say, I mean, my gut feeling, maybe I'm too westernized, so my gut feeling is that freedom talk is very important. Freedom of the press is very important. Even though India always complains, even Indians say there's a lot of problems, and that's true. That there were some downgrades in some index, including the freedom of the press. Still, it is a far more liberal country than China. So on this side of the, on this side, it is definitely better. On the other side, China has benefited massively from some aspects that are not just socialism, because there's such, it is a straight, it is a socialist market economy with Chinese characteristics. That was the Constitution says. So I don't know if the old socialist was still called. It has lots of capitalist elements, lots of inequality, but true, there is this planning going on, central planning, and Professor Banik was mentioning Alibaba, and Alibaba is really a paradox, in my opinion. I've been studying and teaching international trade theory, and I must say, none of these theories could really explain the boom. Who would have predicted 10 years before that in China we would see the largest business to business platform and the highest IPO in Wall Street in 2014. Nobody, they would say no, they don't have the technology, they don't have the human capital needed, they cannot compete with eBay, Amazon, and so on. Forget about it. Yet we see all this. It's amazing, because maybe this was the product of the opposite of what we usually think, because censorship, state control kind of block competition from the rest of the world. They left demand unserved. At the same time, this would be a catastrophe in many countries, especially in small countries like Switzerland, because we would never be able to, in a small country, to invest in research and development what is needed to really have a national champion in a technology that we don't manage, especially with increasing returns. But a market like China is very big. So, and endogenous growth theory tells you that when a market is big, the market size, profits of innovators could be big as well. So you serve many more people, and you will make much more money than in a small market. Why is Hollywood in the United States? Because Hollywood is a big market. Why is Bollywood in India? Because India is a big market. So when a big market is there, miracles can happen. Okay, and this is a case in which maybe the China's government, maybe not even on purpose, managed to facilitate the infant industries in high tech by restricting entry from outsiders. And now they are no more infant. They trained a lot in a big market. So the infant industry argument that we usually say doesn't work. It doesn't work for most small countries, but I wouldn't exclude for big countries. So this is interesting. But anyway, the big question mark is what will happen later. Semoglu and Robinson have written a book this year. It's called The Narrow Corridor. It's a big book on institutions and growth performance, and their prediction is that China will not make it. It is a despotic country. They call it despotic Leviathan since the time of the Qin dynasty, and the legalist view that the government must be strong and society weak. They have this element, and they claim that when it comes to innovation, this will stifle China. I'm not so pessimistic about China, but still, this since given the authority where it comes from, probably the most important growth economists in the world, Darona Semoglu and James Robinson, so that's super important, guys. So I would. But if they are right, then it means that India can do better by being more free and more innovative, and you can maybe count on a people who are not scared of inventing new things or saying new things. Because if you are not scared of saying new things, then you will be more creative. And we see lots of intellectuals in India who win. Last year Nobel Prize in economics, Banerjee, and his wife won the Nobel Prize. So he is Indian, and Amartya Sen, and many others. So you have seen none of comparable to them for China. So I think given the intellectual intellectual livelihood and openness, and even multicultural. I mean, the multicultural aspect could be problematic for tensions if they do not get along. But if they manage to get along better, it could become a resource. So even in Switzerland is small, but it's fragmented in 26 cantons, and in the past, with each canton, the canton I mean, in St. Gallen, it was fragmented. Every city has its different religion, and they would fight with each other, kill each other. It was a disaster. Switzerland was poor and torn and abused by other powers, foreign powers, until they started to unify and say, okay, let's, cooperating is better. Then this plurality has become a strength, and now Switzerland has the largest share of non-Swiss non-Swiss born residents. So people like me, born in another country who live here, is the highest in Europe, and it's an extremely innovative country. I don't know if this would have been possible in a centrally planned economy, because there, China has its ethnical fragmentation, but it's nothing compared to India or to Europe. Yet it's creating lots of tension, potential tension. So I don't know. Maybe there is. I'm very favorable. I'm very optimistic about China as well. I think it's underrated by our Western models, but at the same time, I would think that it's despotic element that is preceded communism, but well suited communism, at least with Chinese characteristics, could be a potential problem for China.
Cozzi, for the benefit of our student, because you are mentioning about endogenous growth theory and the size of the market. So far as we understand that endogenous growth theory basically talked about this learning by doing, so if I have one good student in the class, and if I form a group of students around him or her, the knowledge spread, and therefore the people in general become more productive. But how do you connect this endogenous growth theory with the size of the market, like what you were mentioning about Bollywood or Hollywood? In what way it helps? Can you just explain a little bit more of?
Absolutely. Thanks, Nilanjan, for. So from an economic theory point of view, in microeconomics, we distinguish between rival goods and non-rival goods. So I had some coffee here. Unfortunately, there isn't anymore because I ate it. And I cannot eat it again. I cannot drink. Sorry, I drank it. I cannot drink it again. I cannot share it with you. You wouldn't even accept if I consume my coffee. None of you can consume my coffee. So this means it's a rival good. Now, if I show you the ranking, the elite quality index. Okay, I can see the elite quality index and think about it, or any other idea, and you can see it as well. So without the fact that you are seeing India scorecard right now doesn't preclude me to see it at the same moment. Okay, so there are some goods that are called non-rival. Okay, so they can be used by theoretically unlimited number of people without preclusion, unless there are restrictions that are institutional. But technically speaking, they can do. So for movies, it's the same thing. Once the movie is is expensive to do, but once it's done, then theoretically could be seen in your laptops, in your TVs, or without the fact that there are more users, more viewers doesn't reduce the quality of the film for the others. So this is a non-rival thing. Then if we can put some restrictions, some institutional restrictions to make it excludable to those who do not pay, then we can say you can pay per view. So if more people are viewing it, more people are paying. Now, if this film is written in the Swiss German, which is a dialect that we speak in this part of Switzerland, that it's kind of an old Germanic language that even the Germans don't understand. Okay, probably only the people in our cantons, German, Swiss German-speaking cantons would understand the movie. And there are excellent movies in Swiss German, but very few people view them. And so the profits, it's not a profitable industry, so they will probably remain isolated cases. Okay, one can put subtitles, but. Yeah, but still, so the possibility of having a large market for non-rival idea allows more, to have more revenues because more people are paying. Okay, so this is something super important. Paul Romer, Nobel Prize winner last year, 2 years ago for economics. Is the inventor of endogenous growth theory, and he insisted a lot because where the size of the market is large, as soon as I have an idea, you, for example, develop a new app. Okay, many of my students at the moment are trying to develop a new app because they say, if I can sell the use of that to a large market in the world, then I will become rich. Okay, so if markets are large, innovation is about the production of new ideas at the end of the day. Okay, be they new products and designs of new products, new movies, whatever, new processes. So if you can get some money out of the people who are or firms that are using that idea, then you will get much more money in a large market, which means large markets are more incentivized research and development and innovation much more than small market. And I think this is the secret why China managed to catch up in innovation despite closing. It didn't close completely, so it was really smart, actually, because in the special, actually, the father of Xi Jinping was the inventor of the special economic zones, by the way. He was also, he had very, very tough life, and he was a victim of the Cultural Revolution. Then he was rehabilitated, and when he was in the camps with the Cultural Revolution, Xi Jinping was a child. So and then it became again super important, and he convinced Deng Xiaoping to start the first special economic zones. So in the special economic zones, the foreign firms can come. They have to share ideas with the local entrepreneurs. They have to form joint ventures. And then they have other advantages like tariffs and so on, lower tariffs and so on. So they started coming to penetrate the Chinese market, but the Chinese market was not completely open. So ideas are taken from the rest of the world, but then they are applied to a large market. This is supported to innovation. Of course, this also operates in the rest of the world. And we can see sometimes when markets open, even with globalization, we have seen lots of innovation going up. Also lots of inequality, unfortunately, because in innovation, when one gets the good idea, then they get lots of profits, but the others may lose them. So there are contradictions, there are problems. The government should intervene, redistribute with the redistribution. But still, non-rival goods means incentives to innovation.
That's very well said. And so, students, any other question from any one of you before, because this has been a really fascinating discussion over the last 1.5 hours. And we kind of learned, if I were to summarize, we started off with the concept of the role of the elite in any particular society, and whether having more elites is good or bad. That depends upon whether the elites are kind of extracting or maybe contributing more to the economic growth. But at the same time, to sustain the economic growth, it is also necessary on part of the elites to contribute more to the society for the business to grow. Now, we have also been talking about few elements of public goods, and in what way this when we are talking about the public good or the size of the market, it actually helps for the business to grow. So you should also try to. We have talked about we have taken the example from China. We have taken the example from India. We have tried to understand that what would be the policy look like if we have an element of regional inequality. On the other hand, as in the case of India, we find that unlike China, where the regional inequality is more, with coastal areas growing faster, in case of India, we find the inequality more in the context of within a particular state. Within a particular state, we find that the inequality is increasing. And in what way the freedom of press, or in what way these other factors which Cozzi has spoken about, is actually contributing to the overall growth of any particular economy. So that is to summarize, and hopefully we will be able to have Cozzi sometime in the future, as and when this work progress further. And if we are doing this work on India, that would be the best that we can do. Before I let Cozzi go, anyone from the student community, any question for Professor Cozzi?
Sir, one last question is there.
Yeah.
So the way that Indian economy is suffering because of COVID, and many other economies too, in the stimulus plan of India, which was brought recently, which was consisted of 20,000 crore, I guess. I'm not so sharp with the facts in this one, but the stimulus plan in UK, in which they cover the salary of 80% of people, and the stimulus plan in Germany, in which they gave the stimulus package money to the small businesses to pay their employees, and also people who were unemployed, and the rent was made illegal. So, is that plan going to work in India in any way? Is there some mistake which happened in the stimulus plan which was proposed in India?
Well, probably Professor Banik can tell you much more about that.
Yeah.
Regarding support for unemployed people, I can say that in Europe there is a very important plan that is called SURE, SURE, and the European Commission is trying to help the unemployed massively, and to fund those who lose their job, at least to guarantee that they get certain minimum income that they could rely upon, and this has created big innovations for Europe, because Europe is planning to fund these interventions with Euro bonds, we could say, so with bonds issued by the European Union, which will be the big financial innovation of the next few years. So I think, yeah, the government should intervene and help those. I mean, because the point is that the government is forcing people not to work. Theoretically speaking, people would go to work, and the markets would, welcome them. Okay, so the government is forcing people not to work due to the COVID restrictions. So it has, I think, the moral obligation to help these people survive when they don't work. And it's also in their interest, because otherwise there will be lots of social unrest. So I think any fiscal measure, targeted to mitigate the effects of the corona restrictions are important. Of course, in Europe, it is very difficult, because we have a central bank that sometimes we cannot really activate to monetize government deficit and debt too easily. Even though now the European Central Bank has also reformed this massively, so that they are hugely helping. But China and India, like the United States and the UK, have the advantage of having the support of the central bank. It's true this may generate inflation in the longer run. In India, it is already on the rise, even though it's still controlled, but with 7.5% now. One should start to keep an eye on it, but still, it's very. I mean, it's part of the if the government is inflicting a recession, then the government has to help the people not suffer, because the motivation of this recession is to help people not suffer, to save lives. The economies should contribute to that. There is by suggesting policies that will mitigate the effects of that, the economic effects. Also for the firms, several firms are shutting down. Small firms are shutting down. They cannot count on credit. Sometimes, even in Italy, we see now that mafia is taking over credit to some small firms in the south. So it is very important that the government guarantees that funding to the firms remain controlled at reasonable interest rates. Obviously, countries that have a financial infrastructure already are facilitated. So credit, microcredit, all these measures should be activated also for developing countries, especially for developing countries. Yeah.
Another thing, Cozzi, which is happening is you mentioned about this Europe, the bond thing. Now, in the context of India, Ishan, just so you know, that there are various ways of intervening. So in India, what has happened is the government is giving indirect, or they are following that indirect intervention. What they are suggesting is, if you have taken loan, you get few more months to repay back the loan. If you were to pay the tax, you get few more months to repay back the tax. So that is not the direct way of intervention. But on the other hand, if you see some other countries, for instance, Indonesia, for instance, Malaysia, for instance, some other Asian country, where they are actually going for direct intervention, where they are actually putting money in the bank account of the poor for them to buy foods, for them to get access to better healthcare, So that is one big element of differentiation between what India has been doing. Because in India, the intervention has been more like giving incentive, which is not direct, It is like you have taken loan, maybe the rate of interest has come down. It's not like as if giving money directly in your pocket so that you can spend money, So that is one thing which worry me, because if I were to increase the consumption, if we want to revive the economy back into normalcy, somehow I should ensure that the government is giving direct or doing direct intervention.
So that's very important. Yeah. And it's also actually in Europe is the same thing. If you see Italy, we have given this tax relief till the end of the year, and also the moratorium on debt, so small firms can avoid, are not forced to repay debt. Now, of course, this is indirect. And we don't know exactly what will happen at the end of it, because when they have to pay altogether, probably it will become direct. So many advanced countries have done that. I think it's not a bad. It's not a bad policy at all. And I would consider with poor people, especially with food price inflation, also direct help is needed, but. It's important to have a menu of policies because at the government level, the crisis is already reducing the tax income of the government because when the economy cannot produce, they have much lower incomes. They pay less taxes, so the tax proceeds of the governments have slumped everywhere. So this is already a problem. Also, when we give a tax relief for a while, the government is getting less money. So it is in a very difficult situation, because the government needs to pay more to the poor or to the small firms at the same time, and also pay more for the health services, and at the same time earning less. So some caution is needed, and we don't know how long the COVID crisis will last. We are in Europe at the beginning of the winter season. So now in Australia is much better. They say the COVID is out, but also it's starting. The summer will start soon. So I think Indian government borrow these policies as well. They I think can work, and they should complement regarding macro stimulus, I think I would be very careful in distinguishing public expenditure meant to boost the economy and public expenditure meant to redistribute in favor of the poor. Because when you force people not to go to work, you can boost the economy as much as you want, but those people will not go back to work. So in our models, we have unemployment, or also monetary policy. The Taylor rule, they decide on monetary policy based on unemployment. But when unemployment increases because people are forced not to go to work, there is little to do. This unemployment will not be recovered. So we are targeting the extra unemployment that maybe is just due to demand factors, then it can be targeted. And more importantly, we must be ready for after, because after, if firms start piling up debts because they cannot survive, they cannot pay back stuff, so they borrow, and also if they borrow to pay taxes and so on, then after the corona problem is, or the corona restrictions get waived because maybe the health improves, then they will not be able to restart. Many firms will go bankrupt. So I think it is quite intelligent to have a mixture of policies in which you allow the firms not to go bankrupt or not to pile up too much debt. At the same time, you do not boost the demand too much, because you will have to keep this card for the future, for after, when these people will be allowed to work. And but at the same time, you need to redistribute in favor of the poor. So I think this is sort of a general picture that I view very important for government policy at the moment.
So, Cozzi, do you as a macroeconomist foresee that we are heading for another big depression kind of event? Because with so much of pump priming, with all the central bank around the world, they are going for expansionary monetary policy. Do you see that? And on the other hand, because of this, you see the stock markets around the world are going up, so which is not supported by the real sector. So do you see that sooner or later the stock market is going to come tumbling down, or what's your view on that?
I mean, it depends on the health of the banking system, because as you rightly mentioned before, in the previous crisis, 2007-8 financial crisis and 2008-9 recession, the problem came from the financial sector, because they had piled a lot of non-performing loans and bad credit. Now, in several countries, I need to check for India, but in several countries before the corona crisis, the bank sector was very healthy, especially in Europe. They underwent 10 years of restructuring since the great financial crisis, and finally which in Europe was aggravated by the sovereign debt crisis. So our banks were in shambles until a couple of years ago, until let's say 2008. Then they finally cleaned up their balances. So as they arrived to the corona crisis equipped with much better health, and they helped a lot. So at least the first round was okay. Now the big worry is with the second wave, they may start piling problems, especially with non-performing loans that are hugely accumulating in Europe, but I guess the same is happening in India as well. So monetary policy should take care of that, because then if this is not cured, then after the economy starts reopening, recovery will struggle, because firms will not be able to get money from the banks. Banks will not be able to.
So when you say that the monetary policy should take care of that, are you going to say that we should stop quantitative easing? Is that what you are referring to?
No. I mean, it depends. Again, quantitative easing is another thing, because on the one side, the monetary policy should help the banks. On the other side, what you're probably mentioning is the fact that the central banks are buying bonds at too high prices, which doesn't transfer really to much of the population, and may still speculation. Also, and then trickle down to the stock market. So it is true that it depends on the quantity. Quantitative easing is a larger work. For example, at the moment, the ECB is accepting junk bonds as a collateral for credits to local banks. This is acceptable. This is not. I mean, this is obviously very unconventional, but it is important. It helps save the life of the banks, which in turn will save the lives of the firms and so on, and the economy. On the other side, we also see government bonds, with negative interest rates or very low interest rates being issued right now. This is okay to save the government balances, but still, this extra accommodating monetary policy depends. I think it's important to design it well, because the risk you are saying could be there. There could be speculation, especially if the stock market gets out of control. Yes.
Okay, today is another big day. Hopefully, we'll get to know the US election result, which might also have some implication. So, with that, any further question for Professor Cozzi? He is about to leave. So, any one of you, any question?
So
Okay.
just a small question.
Yeah. Isha.
After we come out of this COVID crisis, won't it be advantageous for the economy to create artificial demand?
Well, again, when the point is with people getting poorer, firms getting into trouble, banks getting into trouble, maybe the economy will not recover as it should. So we would be in a situation, unfortunately, similar to that of the financial crisis, because the financial problems are due to the COVID restrictions, so are piling up. Slowly, but are piling up. So we could face a financial, let's say, a credit crunch situation after the end of the strict Corona crisis, and that will stifle growth. So central bank interventions and will be needed to help that, but also a boost from fiscal policy to try to reactivate the economy may be needed. I think this is very important.
Okay. So.
For this reason, it's important maybe not to lose oral ballots immediately. So to design dynamically what may happen, what we will have to do.
So thank you very much. This has been an fantastic discussion. I don't know how much the student enjoyed, but on my part, I learned quite a bit. And I'm sure that the student also have their own way of extending their gratitude to you. But on their behalf, let me thank you one more time to be able to come and speak to our students.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I really appreciate it. Great questions, great interventions. I also enjoyed talking with you. It's an extremely smart group. Yeah. I think it's a great university. Really.
Yeah, we are hopeful about this bunch of students. So let's see how things shape up. So thank you, Cozzi. You please feel free to leave. And once I'm going to share this recording with you, and we are also going to put this on our website. And so I'm going to share that with you so that you can also access it.
Thank you.
Thank you one more time. And see you pretty soon online. I don't know offline when we can meet, but online surely we will be.
Yeah, let's keep in touch, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Care. Okay.
With pleasure.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.